She smashed the wine glass before she said it. That's what nobody saw. A tiny crack, her thumb pressing too hard on the stem as she leaned forward with that theatrical sigh she uses when she wants an audience. The stem didn't break, but the sound was sharp enough to silence the room for a beat. Then, with all those eyes on her, she straightened up, lifted her chin, and announced, "I think we should take a break," like she was auditioning for a role she'd already decided she deserved. Her friends went still, then grinned, waiting for my meltdown, my pleading, my scene. They wanted drama. They wanted the older guy groveling. What they got instead was me looking at her like she'd just tried to sell me a broken lawnmower for full price. I said, "Okay, enjoy your freedom." Not loud, not angry, just final. The kind of final that doesn't wait for applause. Her best friend snorted, then choked on it when she realized nobody else found it funny. 6 seconds later, maybe 7, the entire room's energy flipped. And hey, since most folks here listen to these stories without subscribing, do it if you want more of this madness. It keeps the whole team breathing. Anyway, I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. I just walked out with the steady calm of a man who had already packed away every emotional liability she thought she had leverage over. The hallway outside her apartment felt colder than usual, like the building itself wanted distance from whatever performance she'd just put on. I heard someone inside whisper, "He didn't even argue," followed by another voice saying, "Wait, is he serious?" That was the first moment, the very first crack, when her confidence shifted, because she knew my tone. She'd heard it twice before in our relationship, both times right before I made a decision she didn't see coming. She once called it my dead calm. I liked that. It fit. I kept walking, hands in my pockets, her laughter from earlier still lingering in my ears. Not from tonight, no. I mean the months before, when she'd toss little jabs at me in front of her group and laugh like I was part of the joke. When she'd ask if my old man routines would let me stay up past 10, when she'd dismiss my work like it was some quaint hobby I played with between naps. She thought I let it roll off me. She didn't know I was cataloging every single moment. Patterns, behaviors, the way she looked over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't watching. The private satisfaction she took in controlling the narrative. She liked being the star, just never of her own life, always at someone else's expense. Tonight wasn't spontaneous. I knew that instantly. She'd planned it, the lighting, the guests she selected, the way she'd worn that top she only put on when she wanted validation from people who weren't me. The music she'd chosen, soft but pretentious enough for her friend group to nod along like connoisseurs of overpriced playlists, the half-fake sigh she gave right before the declaration. It was all choreography. She wanted humiliation. She wanted leverage. She wanted to show them she could discard me like a receipt from a store she pretended she didn't shop at. But my reaction, that wasn't in her script. My exit wasn't part of her act. She expected fireworks, begging, something she could twist later into "he made a scene." She needed an audience to justify whatever narrative she'd cooked up. And when I deprived her of that, the performance collapsed mid-stage. I almost felt the weight of her shock pushing between my shoulder blades as I reached the elevator. I hit the button, waited, hands still steady, not calm, steady. There's a difference. Calm is passive, steady is chosen. And the whole time one thought kept circling my mind. She thinks this is about tonight. She thinks I'm hurt, blindsided, emotional. She has no idea she just walked directly into the decision I made months ago. The decision she pushed me toward every time she treated me like an accessory rather than a partner. The elevator doors open with that tired, grown older buildings make. And I stepped inside without hesitation, leaving her staged breakup behind like the prop it was. Upstairs, someone's TV spilled canned laughter into the hallway, too loud, too artificial, and for a brief second I wondered if that's what her friend sounded like as soon as the door closed behind me. Smug, superficial, complicit. Except her. Hers wouldn't be laughter. Hers would be the first flicker of panic. Tiny, quiet, invisible to everyone but her. Because deep down, she already sensed it. I didn't walk out defeated. I walked out finished. For 2 years, she treated me like a prop, something to place in the room so she could point at it and get a cheap laugh. The first time she did it, it was almost subtle, a throwaway line at a dinner with her coworkers. "Oh, don't mind him, he just likes to pretend he understands what we talk about." They giggled, and she basked in it like she'd earned applause. I told myself it was a slip. Everyone jokes too far once. But she did it again the next time, and again, and again. Eventually, the pattern broke the surface like a quiet fin of a shark passing by, never attacking, just circling. Her friends started joining in, not because they disliked me, because she set the tone. She made it normal to use me as the punchline. I didn't react. That annoyed her, actually. She'd study my face after each dig, waiting for the flush of embarrassment, the defensive protest, the wounded pride. Instead, she got a man sipping his drink and taking mental notes. Quiet doesn't mean blind. Silence doesn't mean passive. I simply understood early that she thrived on reaction, and I was done feeding that habit. Besides, I had more important work to do, the kind that doesn't get clapped for, but absolutely pays off. So, while she played queen of the one-liners, I was untangling my finances from hers, strand by strand. First, the savings she thought we shared. She didn't notice the balance shifting because she never looked at numbers unless they involved her shopping cart. Then the passwords. I changed them gradually, never all at once, like trimming a plant so slowly it takes weeks before anyone notices the shape has changed. She kept using the old ones for months, assuming the glitch was her phone. She'd grumble, "Technology hates me, Pini." And I'd smile sympathetically, thinking, no, just accountability. Then there were her spending habits, not the obvious ones. Everyone buys shoes, take out random nonsense. I mean the pattern behind the spending, the way she'd rush to buy gifts for certain coworkers, but never mention what they were for, the way receipts disappeared too quickly, the way she avoided letting me see confirmation emails for trips she never ended up taking. I didn't accuse, I logged. I built a timeline so detailed it looked like the blueprint for a building she didn't know was being constructed right under her feet. She kept treating these things like passing whims. I treated them like data points. The private messages were the most revealing, not because of romantic secrets, but because of the contempt. Not overt, not screaming, just the casual dismissal woven into her conversations. "He's harmless," she wrote once. Harmless. Funny choice of word. She typed it like it was a compliment, but it read like a diagnosis. On another thread, she joked that I was basically a retirement plan with legs. I would have laughed at the creativity if I weren't already busy moving assets to a protected account under my own name. One night, at a friend's barbecue, she put her arm around me and said, "Don't mind him, he's shy." The guy next to us raised a brow. I wasn't shy. I simply didn't treat social gatherings like auditions. That was the same night she excused herself 3 times to take calls she claimed were from her sister. Yet her sister later asked me why she didn't pick up that entire weekend. Interesting discrepancy. I didn't confront it. I didn't stalk, snoop, or threaten. I simply filed it away like another puzzle piece for later. During those 2 years, the hurt was real. Sharp, quiet, humiliating in a slow drip kind of way. But pain is a hell of a motivator once you stop treating it like a wound and start treating it like information. Every public slight, every backhanded compliment, every joke at my expense sharpened the picture I was building. And the picture was simple. She thought she could control the narrative forever because I never pushed back. She didn't realize the truth yet. The absence of a reaction wasn't weakness. It was strategy. I was preparing for the moment she'd pushed too far, the moment she'd assume she held all the strings, the moment she'd perform one humiliation too many in front of an audience that didn't matter. And when that day came, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to justify myself. I just needed to let her deliver her big theatrical line, thinking she held center stage, so I could finally walk off it. While I stepped into the hallway and let the elevator swallow me, she was already slipping back into performance mode. I can picture it clearly even now, because people like her don't deviate from the script. They cling to it like a lifeline. She probably lifted her glass again, shook off the crack in her voice, and said something like, "Anyway, where were we?" The kind of line meant to pull focus back to her, to the show, to the curated version of herself she used to distract from the mess underneath. And because her friends are trained to orbit her like decorative satellites, they rallied. One of them clapped. Another said, "You're better off without him, honestly." A third toasted to her new independence, as if she'd escaped a cult instead of a stable relationship she'd been silently draining dry. What none of them noticed at first was the tiny twitch near her left eye, that nervous pulse she gets when something isn't going according to plan. The group laughed, congratulated her, nudged her about finally being single again. And one of them, the one who always tries too hard to be edgy, chimed in with, "Time to upgrade, girl." That earned a round of cackles. She laughed too, but it wasn't natural. It was hollow in the way a dropped ornament sounds right before it shatters. because even while she smiled and leaned into the chorus of fake encouragement, her eyes kept sliding to her phone like it might grow teeth. The screen stayed dark. She expected at least one message from me, something dramatic, a "we need to talk," maybe, or a pathetic "can we fix this?" Anything she could brandish as proof that she was still in charge. But the silence from my end was so profound it had a gravitational pull. Her thumb hovered near the screen, tapping it like she could shock it into life. Still nothing. One of her friends noticed and joked, "Relax, he's probably sulking." She forced a smirk, but her knuckles tightened. Because she knew my version of sulking didn't exist. My quiet always meant something different, something dangerous. Meanwhile, I wasn't pacing or analyzing or drowning in emotion. I was in my living room, lights low, laptop open, leaning back in my chair with the same ease as a man paying bills on a Sunday. My financial advisor was on video call, walking me through the last steps of the transfer. I nodded, clicked, confirmed, and watched 3 months of silent preparation click into place. I didn't even hear the celebratory chaos she and her audience were creating across town. Didn't need to. Their noise was irrelevant. My silence was the move. She raised another toast at roughly the same moment I finished signing the final digital form. Her glass probably clinked harder than necessary against her friends. Mine didn't move, she told them confidently. "He always comes crawling back." That line, those exact words, were predictable enough for me to hear them in my head without being anywhere near the room. And maybe she believed it when she said it, maybe she needed to, but her confidence was already slipping around the edges like a poorly glued label peeling off a bottle. Another guest laughed too loudly. Someone made a comment about her being back on the market, which made her grin a little too wide. But her eyes, those were stuck on that phone like it held her next breath hostage. The attention of her friends wasn't enough. It never was. Validation without control meant nothing to her. And right then, she had neither. By the time her friends settled into the couch and opened another bottle, I was leaning back in my chair, sipping water, my advisor saying, "Everything's finalized." Months of planning crystallized in a single anticlimactic moment. No fireworks, no fanfare, just a neat line of completed actions, each one severing another quiet tie she assumed would always remain connected. I closed the laptop, exhaled once, and felt the weight shift, not off my shoulders but into my hands. Full control. She had spent 2 years mistaking my restraint for submission. Tonight she'd pushed the switch, thinking it turned on a spotlight for her, not realizing she'd activated the trapdoor beneath her own feet. Back at her place, someone called out, "Are you okay? You seem distracted." She waved it off, forced a laugh, mumbled something about being totally fine. But she wasn't. She could feel the silence growing thicker, heavier, more intentional. My absence wasn't desperation. It was design. And deep down, for the first time that night, she felt it too. The first flicker of uncertainty. The first whisper that something wasn't going her way because I wasn't crawling back. I was walking forward, without her. She must have woken up expecting the world to orbit her the same way it had the night before, groggy, smug, stretching like a queen after a performance well received. Instead, the first thing she saw was her own reflection in the black screen of her phone. No messages, not a single missed call, not even a petty late-night paragraph begging to communicate. That silence hit her harder than any argument ever could, because silence from me had never been empty. It had weight. It had intent. And she knew it. At 8:14 a.m., her first text came in. "Are we going to talk or not?" I read it while stirring my coffee, let the steam hit my face, set the phone down, and finished the entire mug before replying. When I finally typed, I didn't even bother adding punctuation beyond what was necessary. "There's nothing to talk about. You're free now." The moment I hit send, I pictured the way her face would twist, half confusion, half irritation, a dash of fear she'd refused to admit even to herself. She responded instantly with a call. I declined it. She called again, declined, then again, declined. She shifted from text to voice calls to FaceTime attempts, like a toddler pushing every button on a broken toy. I let them all ring out. The more she tried, the calmer I felt. There's something poetic about letting a person exhaust themselves against a wall you built without ever breaking a sweat. By 10, she'd stopped calling but started messaging her friends, something I didn't need to see to know. She'd be telling them I was being dramatic or misunderstanding the situation, rewriting the event as if she hadn't staged a breakup performance in front of them like some wine-fueled talent show. But even her friends wouldn't swallow that lie whole. They were there. They heard her speech. They heard my response. They saw the shock on her face. And they saw me walk out without hesitation. By noon, the predictable happened. She drove to my place, not fast, not slow, anxious speed, the kind where the driver's replaying imaginary arguments in their head, rehearsing outrage, building up momentum that collapses immediately at impact. She parked crooked, hopped out, marched toward the door with her "I'm the reasonable one here" face on, and pulled out her key like she was about to unlock a memory she still owned, only to find the key didn't fit anymore. She jiggled it once, twice, and then jammed it hard enough to scratch the metal. That's when I opened the door. Not wide, just enough for her to see me leaning casually on the frame. "You changed the locks?" she demanded. I shrugged. "You said break." I honored it. Her eyes flashed, and for the first time since last night, I saw something crack through the irritation, a small, sharp edge of anxiety. She hadn't expected consequences. She had never prepared for them. She thought last night's stunt existed in a vacuum, that the world would pause while she entertained an audience. But real life doesn't clap on cue. And now she was standing by a door that no longer opened for her, holding a key that symbolized exactly how much access she'd already lost. "I didn't mean it like that," she snapped. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I repeated, calm enough to make her flinch. "You announced a break in front of a room full of witnesses. I'm just respecting your decision." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Not at first, because the truth was settling in. The world she'd controlled so effortlessly, the dynamics, the power plays, the little humiliations she thought were harmless, was unraveling in real time. Behind her, I swear I could feel the echo of her friends' laughter from the night before. That smug, breathless cackling they used to inflate her ego like a parade balloon. And now it was deflating fast, leaving her standing alone on my doorstep with no audience to back her up, no script to follow, no safety net beneath her feet. "You're overreacting," she said finally, voice softer, trying to regain footing. "No," I replied, "I'm just responding." And it hit her then, the subtle but devastating difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is emotional. Responding is deliberate. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it because she'd handed me the perfect moment. That realization flickered across her face, dark and undeniable. Rising anxiety replaced irritation as she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. She never had been. And now, for the first time, she finally understood that. She strutted into brunch like she had something to celebrate. Heels sharp, sunglasses oversized, ego freshly rehearsed. Her friend group had texted a flurry of supportive nonsense that morning, the same women who clinked their glasses at her breakup performance. She needed that validation, needed the chorus, needed the applause she didn't get from me. She ordered confidently, avocado toast, side of fruit, mimosa, extra shot, because she lived her life like a woman who believed menus existed purely for her convenience. Her card, however, believed otherwise. The first decline happened quietly. The server leaned in and whispered, "It didn't go through," with that polite but concerned voice they use when they assume it's a bank error. She laughed. "Oh my God, that's weird. Run it again." Declined. A second attempt brought a frown. A third brought silence. Her friends exchanged glances, that subtle brand of pity-laced amusement that only surfaces when someone who normally dominates the room suddenly looks human. She excused herself with a tight smile and stepped outside, phone already in her hand, convinced she'd fix everything in 30 seconds. Then she opened the banking app. Our shared account, the one she treated like a personal gift card with my name at the bottom, now said, "Access restricted, user permissions updated." She blinked, refreshed the page, refreshed it again. Nothing changed. The first wave of panic hit her so fast she had to sit down on the curb. My name was gone from the joint title display. The balance she believed was her endless allowance had been quietly reorganized into legally structured compartments she couldn't access even if she paid a hacker in Bitcoin. And right at that moment, I imagined her realizing something she had ignored for years. I wasn't dependent on her chaos. She was dependent on my stability. The moment she grasped that, my phone rang. I let it buzz until the vibration felt like background noise. She called again. Same result. By the third attempt, I answered, mostly because I knew precisely what she'd sound like. "What did you do?" she snapped, skipping all greetings. I leaned back in my chair, tapped the PDF on my screen filled with months of her spending. Designer bags listed next to emergency dental work she'd claimed. Spa appointments the same day she'd sworn she was visiting her sick aunt. All of it itemized, categorized, logged with dates and receipts. "What I should have done months ago," I said. "You can't do this," she shot back, her voice sharp and cracking at the edges like thin ice. "This is a misunderstanding. A stupid fight. You're acting insane." "No," I replied, "I'm acting free." She inhaled sharply, and I could almost visualize her pacing, hair flying, hand on her forehead in that dramatic, tortured gesture she practiced in every reflective surface she passed. "We need to fix this. Fix it right now. Do you hear me?" I sighed, not out of exhaustion but finality. You wanted freedom, financially, emotionally, publicly. Now you have all three. Silence stretched between us, the heavy kind that never existed before because she always filled it with noise, words, excuses, laughter, manipulation, deflection. But now she had nothing to stand on, no script, no angle. Finally she whispered, "You're punishing me." "No," I said softly. "Punishment requires anger. I'm simply adjusting." Her breath hitched. The panic finally broke through her bravado, and I could hear it. The tremble, the disbelief, the dawning realization that the world she'd shaped around herself was beginning to crack along the fault lines she'd ignored, because brunch wasn't the real problem. Brunch was just the first consequence. Her lifestyle had always been a tower built on assumptions, and in one morning she discovered I had quietly pulled out the support beams months ago. She just never expected the collapse to start with something as humiliatingly simple as a declined card in front of her audience. And for the first time since I walked out of her staged breakup, she wasn't irritated. She was afraid. Her friend group had always functioned like a personal cheer squad, loud, loyal in appearance, and conveniently blind to anything that threatened her spotlight. But the morning after her card fiasco, the tone of the group chat shifted in a way she didn't recognize at first. She opened it expecting sympathy, maybe outrage on her behalf, or at least someone blaming the restaurant for shady card machines. Instead, she was greeted with links, screenshots, clips someone had recorded her little breakup performance, and someone else had sent it to the rest. The short video showed her making her dramatic announcement, chin lifted, voice pitched upward, friends giggling, and then it showed me standing there, unbothered, saying, "Okay, enjoy your freedom," before calmly walking out. The clip cut right as her face fell. Whoever edited it had a sense of timing. Below the video, the comments she couldn't control began stacking like bricks in a wall closing her in. "This is embarrassing. Not the flex you think it is. Honestly, he handled that better than you." And the worst one, the quiet dagger. "Yikes." She tried to defend herself with a half joke. "Haha, not my best moment," but the group chat didn't erupt into supportive emojis like usual. Instead, a few people simply stopped typing mid-bubble. Her closest friend, the one she thought would always take her side, wrote privately, "Maybe you pushed too far." She stared at that message for several minutes. She didn't respond. She didn't know how to, because pushing too far was her specialty. It was her signature move. And for the first time, someone wasn't applauding it. They were calling it out. At work, she tried to shake it off, walking in with her usual "I run this place" posture. But she wasn't running anything. Not her finances, not her relationship, not her reputation, especially not the whispers that spread faster than she could pretend they didn't exist. Her coworkers, who had always loved gossiping with her, now kept conversations tight and cautious. A few avoided eye contact. One had watched the video and said nothing, just raised an eyebrow when she walked by. She spent half the morning rereading the group chat, trying to convince herself her friends were just being dramatic, the same line she'd accused me of whenever I didn't play along with her narratives. But the truth was loud in its silence. They weren't rallying behind her this time. They were stepping back, watching the fallout with that quiet curiosity people get when a familiar structure starts showing cracks. By lunchtime, her distraction was visible enough that her boss had to tap her desk and remind her they had a meeting in 10 minutes. She wasn't prepared. She always prided herself on being polished, put together, enviable. But as she tried to gather papers, her hands shook. Twice she dropped her pen. Her boss asked if she was doing okay, which in corporate language means, "You look like a problem." She forced a smile, that same brittle thing she used whenever she needed to pretend she wasn't unraveling. The truth was, she couldn't focus on anything. Not the spreadsheets in front of her, not the meeting agenda, not even her own reflection in the black screen of her laptop. She was thinking about brunch, about the card decline, about the bank account notification that had refused her access, about her friends going quiet, about the video circulating behind her back, about me not calling, not texting, not reacting. She broke halfway through the meeting and stepped into the hallway to call me. I didn't answer. She called again, straight to voicemail, again, voicemail. There's a unique panic that comes from hearing the same automated message over and over, the kind that makes a person realize the story is no longer theirs to steer. A coworker walking by overheard the tension in her voice and gave her a sympathetic smile. She hated that smile. She hated needing sympathy. By mid-afternoon, she tried messaging me instead. "Can we please talk?" 5 minutes later, "This is getting ridiculous." Then more quietly, "Please." I read them. I didn't respond. She'd always relied on noise, her friends' noise, her laughter, her dramatic declarations, my supposed reactions. Now she was in a vacuum of her own making, trying to shout her way out of it. But the walls didn't echo back. By the time she got home from work, her biggest fear wasn't losing me. It wasn't losing money. It wasn't even the humiliation. It was the sudden, jarring realization that the social universe she had built, carefully staged brunches, curated friendships, inside jokes at my expense, wasn't orbiting her anymore. It was collapsing inward, quietly, coldly, and without offering her a hand to grab onto. And for someone who lived off of attention, the isolation hit harder than anything I had done so far. She didn't knock like someone confident. She knocked like someone who'd rehearsed 10 different speeches in her car and forgotten all of them the second her fist touched the wood. When I opened the door, she wasn't wearing the performance face, the one she put on for friends, coworkers, Instagram stories. No makeup layered like armor, no tight smile, just swollen eyes, trembling lip, and a voice that came out cracked. "Can we talk? Please." There was no audience behind her this time, no champagne bottles, no music, just her, alone, afraid of something she didn't have a word for yet. "I didn't mean any of it," she blurted, stepping inside without waiting for permission. That was familiar, her habit of entering spaces like they belonged to her by default. Except this time she paused halfway across the threshold, noticing the subtle shift she couldn't quite name. The place didn't feel like hers anymore. The air didn't bend around her moods. She was a guest, and a nervous one. "It was just a joke," she continued, breathing too fast. "You know how I get when I'm tipsy. It wasn't serious. Please, let's fix this." I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct. I didn't comfort. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, letting her talk herself into circles. She kept searching my face for clues, some sign she could still manipulate her way out. But I gave her nothing. The truth was simple. She wasn't apologizing because she regretted the stunt. She was apologizing because the fallout had finally reached her. She stepped closer. Tears making her mascara streak in uneven lines. "I shouldn't have said it like that. I shouldn't have embarrassed you. I was stupid. Okay? I was stupid. Can we go back to normal? Normal?" She said it like it was a place she could Google Maps her way to. When she finally paused long enough to breathe, I walked to the table and picked up the small envelope that had been sitting there for days. Not because I predicted this moment exactly, but because I understood the pattern. People like her always try to reel you back in right when they realize the leash is no longer attached. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she whispered, eyes already red but now sharpening with fear. "Your finale," I said. She opened the envelope with shaky fingers and unfolded the papers inside. Her eyes scanned the first page, then darted to the second, Then the third. Her breath stuttered. The terms were concise, fair, legally airtight, division of property, clear financial boundaries, a written acknowledgement of shared debts she had created on her own and would be responsible for on her own. Nothing dramatic, nothing spiteful, just clean, controlled structure. "You drafted separation terms?" she asked, voice breaking. "You've been planning this?" "For a while," I said calmly. Her face twisted, shame, anger, disbelief trapped in a single expression. "You're punishing me," she finally cried, clutching the papers like they were burning her. "No," I said, "punishment is emotional. This is structural." She blinked, confused. "You wanted a performance," I continued. "Now you're getting the finale. You announced a break. I'm honoring it, thoroughly." She shook her head, tears dripping onto the document. "I didn't want this. It was just a joke. Why are you being so cold?" "Because cold is what you become after years of someone warming their hands over your dignity." But I didn't say that. Instead, I stepped closer, close enough that she had to look up. "I'm giving you exactly what you claimed you wanted. Freedom, you said it in front of all your friends. You staged it like a show. I'm simply letting the curtain fall." Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to a world where her words had actual consequences. She wasn't used to a man who didn't crumble at tears. She wasn't used to a structure she didn't control. Slowly, painfully, I watched the realization settle into her bones. I wasn't reacting to her anymore. I had already moved on, not emotionally, structurally, logistically, permanently. And for someone who relied on chaos to stay in charge, there was nothing more terrifying than a man who had quietly prepared for the exact moment she overplayed her hand. She folded the papers back into the envelope with trembling fingers and whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever leave." I didn't answer that. Some truths she needed to absorb on her own. Her bravado didn't die quickly. It sputtered and hissed like a wet firework, loud at first, then embarrassingly pathetic. The day after I handed her the envelope, she marched straight into a lawyer's office with the swagger of someone who still believed she was the protagonist in a rom-com where everything resolves in her favor. She plopped the papers onto his polished desk like she was unveiling a scandal. He skimmed them with the slow, methodical precision of a man who had seen far too many theatrics disguised as emergencies. When he finally set the pages down, he didn't look impressed. "Everything he did is clean," he said. She blinked. "What do you mean, clean?" "I mean clean," he repeated, leaning back. "Legally sound. No irregularities, no overreach, no deception. He protected his assets months before the breakup. You were fully permitted to initiate a separation publicly. You stated it clearly, in front of witnesses." She stiffened. "That wasn't serious." He raised an eyebrow. Lawyers don't flinch, but even he seemed surprised by her lack of self-awareness. "Intent doesn't matter here. Action does. And on video, no less." She froze. "Video?" He pulled out his tablet, tapped the screen, and, thanks to the wonders of modern gossip, her friends had already made her humiliation a shareable file. There she was, front and center, announcing, "I think we should take a break," with a performative flourish, basking in attention like a stage light was hitting her face, her friends giggling around her. Then there was me, calm, steady, uttering the line that flipped her world upside down, her face in the recording when I walked out. God, even grainy smartphone footage couldn't hide the shock. Her lawyer let the clip run without commentary, then slid the tablet back toward her. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "If you try to reverse this, you will look unstable. You initiated the separation." He responded rationally. "His preparations were done long before your announcement. A court will see this as him exercising boundaries, not retaliation." She pushed the tablet away so hard it nearly slid off the desk. "This is ridiculous. He knows I didn't mean it." She was trembling, not from sadness, but from the dawning horror of losing terrain. "He took everything literally. Literal is generally how the law works," he said calmly. She stormed out. Later that afternoon, she tried another angle, social validation. The same women who toasted her freedom now treated her like a cautionary tale. Screenshots were circulating faster than she could deny them. Her own words, her smirk, her arrogant tone, her dismissive laugh, all preserved. No room for reinterpretation, no spin, no framing. Her closest friend, once her most loyal defender, finally snapped and said, "You humiliated him. On purpose. What did you expect?" She blocked her on the spot, but that block was a confession in its own pathetic way. By evening, the bravado drained out of her like a punctured balloon. Still, she kept muttering to herself, louder when others were around, quieter when she was alone. "He'll regret this." But even she didn't believe it. The words had no backbone, no venom. They were residue, automatic phrases she used to comfort herself when reality didn't obey her. Her apartment felt smaller, colder. Not physically, psychologically. The furniture she'd bragged about buying, with my money she'd pretended was hers, seemed overly large, like props in a life that no longer matched the script. She walked from room to room like a stranger, touching surfaces as if they might explain how she'd lost control so quickly. She sat on the couch that night, scrolling through the clip again, her clip, watching herself throw away a relationship like a napkin, watching me accept it without flinching. In the reflection of the screen, she saw something she had never seen in herself before. Consequences. She whispered it again, softer this time. "He'll regret this." But her voice shook, a thin trembling thread, and in that tremble, the truth finally showed itself. She wasn't angry at me. She was terrified of the realization that she had nothing left to leverage. Not my money, not my stability, not my reaction, not even her pride. Her world wasn't shrinking. It had already collapsed, and she was standing in the dust, still clutching lines from a script nobody was reading anymore. The signing didn't happen in a conference room or a lawyer's office. It happened in her apartment, neutral ground, though it didn't feel neutral to her. The place still smelled faintly of scented candles and that floral perfume she always oversprayed before guests arrived, except this time there were no guests, no friends, no audience. Just her, hunched over the table she once used to host game nights where I played the role of quiet punchline. Now the table existed for one purpose, a document she could no longer outrun. Her hands shook as she picked up the pen. Not dramatically, she wasn't performing anymore, but involuntarily. The tremor of someone who finally ran out of excuses to hold on to. "You read it all?" I asked. She nodded, eyes down, pupils unfocused like she was staring into the aftermath instead of the words. "And you understand everything?" I continued. "Yes," she whispered. Her signature came out small, almost childlike, as if she were trying to shrink it into insignificance. But ink doesn't care about emotion. It just records what's real. When the pen left the paper, she didn't lean back or sigh or throw a tantrum. She just stared at the spot where her name now lived, permanently beside mine, binding us not in intimacy but in closure. When she finally looked up, her eyes had lost the sharpness, the edge, the superiority she'd worn like jewelry for 2 years. Instead, there was something cracked, honest, bare. "I didn't think you'd ever leave," she said softly. Her voice wasn't accusing, it wasn't angry, it wasn't manipulative, it was wounded, the way someone sounds when they realize the floor they'd been standing on wasn't floor at all, just paper, and now it had burned through. I met her gaze without hesitation. "I didn't leave," I said. "You pushed." She inhaled sharply, as if the sentence struck a nerve she didn't know was exposed. Her shoulders curled inward, instinctively protective, the posture of someone who finally understood their power wasn't power at all, just noise that had stopped working. She swallowed. "Do you think maybe someday we could try again?" There was a time that question might have twisted something in me, but not today. I slid the signed documents together, aligning the edges, making the moment crisp and final. I didn't look at her when she asked. I didn't answer. Silence was the answer, and she knew it. She'd always relied on my responses to guide her, justify her, balance her. Now denied even that, she had nothing left to cling to. Her eyes followed me as I stood up. She didn't reach out, didn't beg, didn't block the door. The performance version of her wanted to, but the real her, the one finally stripped bare, knew this wasn't a scene she could rewrite. I placed the documents on the console near the door, not dramatically, not angrily, just neatly, as if setting down a completed assignment. She watched the gesture like it was the last thread tying us together. Maybe it was. I opened the door. The hallway outside felt brighter, cleaner, as if the building itself exhaled. For one brief moment, she whispered something I almost didn't catch. I didn't mean to lose you. I paused, hand on the doorframe, not for her but for myself, because moments like that tempt the old instincts, the ones conditioned to smooth things over, make peace, minimize damage, but she had written her ending long before that night in front of her friends. I stepped out without a word, and for the first time since we met, the door closed behind me without her permission, without her influence, without her narrative wrapping itself around the moment. Just a door closing. Quiet. Final. The show she staged became her downfall, and she was left in the empty theater, lights cooling, applause long gone, holding nothing but the script she tore up with her own hands. Weeks passed, the kind that moved quietly, not rushed, not dragged, just steady, like life recalibrating itself. I wasn't hiding from anything. I wasn't nursing wounds or replaying scenes. I was just living again in a way that didn't require tiptoeing around someone else's emotional landmines. So when a friend invited me to a backyard gathering, just a few chairs, good music, good food, I went without a second thought. The air smelled like grilled corn and wood smoke, laughter drifting across the yard in the kind of unforced way that doesn't need an audience. I was leaning back in a lawn chair, cold drink in hand, listening to my buddies argue about whether store-bought barbecue sauce is a crime against flavor, when I noticed someone hovering near the patio door. It was her closest friend, the one who used to play hype woman, the one who helped amplify every joke at my expense, the one who recorded the infamous video without knowing it would become Exhibit A in the downfall of her entire performance. She approached slowly, cautiously, almost embarrassed. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied, not moving from my seat. She shifted her weight, fingers fidgeting with the bracelet on her wrist. She regrets everything." I shrugged, not dramatic, not dismissive, just a simple acknowledgement of a simple truth. She should. That alone seemed to shake her. Maybe she expected resentment, maybe curiosity, maybe some wounded nostalgia, but I had none to offer. I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't even interested. She hesitated, then added, "There's something she told us that night, after you left." I raised an eyebrow. She took that as permission to keep going. "She admitted the whole breakup was fake," she said, voice low. "She just wanted to impress us. Look, she thought it would make her seem bold or empowered or whatever. But when you said, 'enjoy your freedom,' the room went dead silent." She paused, pressing her lips together. "We all knew right then. She'd lost you for good." I didn't laugh. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even feel vindicated in the loud, cinematic way some people expect. I just nodded once. Slow, final. Because everything this friend had just confessed wasn't news to me. It was confirmation. Confirmation of what I had already known the moment I walked out of that apartment. Her biggest mistake wasn't the performance. It wasn't the theatrics. It wasn't the audience. It wasn't even the humiliation. It was the belief, the unwavering, arrogant belief that I would always play along, that no matter how far she pushed, no matter how many times she gambled with my dignity, I'd keep following the script she wrote for me. I took another sip of my drink while the friend shifted awkwardly beside me. She seemed to want something. Absolution, maybe, or reassurance that she wasn't complicit. I didn't offer either, not out of cruelty, but because some things don't require commentary. Instead, I looked around the yard, at the people laughing with their whole bodies, at the easy conversations flowing without manipulation or performance. My shoulders relaxed further into the chair, the late afternoon sun warming the side of my face. Behind me, her friend cleared her throat. "If it helps," she murmured, "she finally understands what she did." I nodded again, because acknowledgement was all I had, and all that was necessary. Then I turned back toward the grill, joined the argument about barbecue sauce, and let the world move forward without dragging her name or her memory into it. And somewhere, maybe in her apartment, maybe in her car, maybe sitting on her bed, staring at a phone that would never buzz with my name again, she realized the truth in full. I hadn't left her. She had pushed me away. And when the curtain finally fell, she was the only one still standing on the stage, performing to an empty room. That was the real ending. Quiet, clean, and absolutely undeniably permanent.